Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her back against the rough bark of an ancient redwood, her breath forming small clouds in the crisp mountain air. 3 days had passed since the research station went dark, and she was the sole survivor of what should have been a routine wildlife behavioral study in the Northern California wilderness. The pack had been watching her for hours now. 5 massive wolves, each easily twice the size of any she'd studied in captivity, their amber eyes tracking her every movement through the dense forest. The alpha male stepped forward, his silver-gray coat catching the filtered sunlight that pierced through the canopy above. Elena had read about wolves like this in indigenous folklore, ancient bloodlines that had somehow survived in the deepest parts of the wilderness, growing larger and more intelligent than their conventional cousins. His head reached nearly to her chest, and the intelligence in his gaze was unsettling, almost human in its intensity. Elena slowly reached into her pack, withdrawing a small piece of dried venison from her emergency supplies. She'd been rationing it carefully, but hunger gnawed at her stomach. The alpha's nostrils flared, catching the scent. Instead of tossing the meat away from herself as every survival manual recommended, Elena did something that defied all logic. She placed it on the ground directly between them, then stepped back, maintaining eye contact. The wolf studied her for what felt like an eternity. Pack dynamics were everything to these creatures, and she was either about to be accepted as non-threatening or torn apart for her presumption. The alpha approached the meat slowly, his massive paws silent on the forest floor. He sniffed once, then looked directly at Elena before picking up the venison and retreating to his pack. That night, as Elena huddled in her makeshift shelter of fallen branches and her torn research tarp, she heard them howling. But it wasn't the hunting call she'd expected. It was something else, a complex harmony that seemed to carry across the entire mountain range. When she woke at dawn, she found a freshly killed rabbit just outside her shelter, still warm. The message was clear. The first exchange had been accepted. Elena spent the morning observing from a distance as the pack interacted. The alpha had a mate, a sleek black female with striking blue eyes, and Elena noticed the subtle way she deferred to him while maintaining her own authority over the younger pack members. There were 3 others, 2 subordinate males, and what appeared to be a juvenile female, all watching Elena with cautious curiosity. By midday, Elena made a decision that would change everything. She began following the pack at a respectful distance, matching their pace through the rugged terrain. When they stopped to rest, she stopped. When they moved, she moved. She was asking permission to join their territory, not as a dominant force, but as a potential pack member. The alpha noticed immediately, his ears pricking forward as he assessed this strange new behavior from the human who had shared her food. As afternoon faded to evening, the pack led Elena to a clearing beside a crystal-clear stream. The alpha approached her again, this time close enough that she could see the old scars across his muzzle, evidence of battles fought and survived. He studied her intently, then did something unprecedented. He lowered his massive head and gently pressed his forehead against her outstretched palm. The contact lasted only seconds, but Elena felt the weight of acceptance in that simple gesture. She was no longer just a tolerated presence in their territory. She was being evaluated as something more. The test came 3 days later when Elena heard the unmistakable sound of helicopter rotors cutting through the morning air. She'd been traveling with the pack for nearly a week, learning their patterns, sharing what little food she had, and proving herself capable of keeping up with their relentless pace through treacherous mountain terrain. The wolves scattered immediately at the mechanical noise, but Elena stood frozen in the small meadow where they'd been resting. The helicopter bore the logo of Apex Industries, the same corporation that had been pressuring the Wildlife Service to open this protected land for logging. Elena realized with growing horror that her emergency beacon, which she'd activated days ago, had likely been intercepted. These weren't rescuers. They were corporate security teams who saw her as a witness to be silenced. The Alpha appeared. Beside her, as if materialized from shadow, his massive frame tense with protective instinct. Elena placed her hand on his shoulder, feeling the corded muscle beneath his thick coat. "Easy, boy," she whispered, though she knew he was far from any domesticated animal. The helicopter landed roughly 50 yards away, and 4 armed men in tactical gear emerged. "Dr. Vasquez," the lead operative called out, his voice carrying across the meadow. "We're here to extract you. There's been a situation at the research facility." Elena knew it was a lie. She'd seen the bodies, seen the evidence of deliberate sabotage designed to look like an animal attack. They'd eliminated her team to clear the way for development, and now they needed to eliminate her. What happened next would forever change how Elena understood the concept of loyalty. The Alpha stepped forward, placing himself directly between Elena and the approaching men. His hackles rose, and a low growl rumbled from deep in his chest, not the warning growl of a threatened animal, but the challenging roar of a pack leader defending his territory. The other wolves emerged from the tree line, forming a protective semicircle around Elena. The lead operative raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Elena stepped forward. "You want me?" she called out. "Then you'll have to go through them first." It was a bluff born of desperation, but the Alpha seemed to understand. He bared his fangs, and his growl deepened to a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very ground. The standoff lasted several minutes, with the operatives clearly uncertain how to proceed. Their orders were to make Elena's death look accidental, but facing down a pack of massive wolves wasn't part of their plan. Finally, the Alpha made his decision. He charged. What followed was not a typical wolf attack. This was coordinated, intelligent, and devastating. The pack moved like a single organism, separating the operatives, using the terrain to their advantage. Elena watched in awe as these magnificent creatures fought not just with animal instinct, but with tactical precision that spoke to an intelligence far beyond what science attributed to their species. Within minutes, it was over. 3 of the operatives were dead, and the 4th was retreating toward the helicopter, bleeding from multiple wounds. As the helicopter lifted off in panicked retreat, Eleanor found herself surrounded by the pack. The Alpha approached her, blood on his muzzle, but his eyes bright with something that looked remarkably like satisfaction. He had defended her as he would defend his own family, and in doing so had declared her worthy of pack protection. Elena knelt beside him, checking his wounds, and realized that the bond between them had transcended species. She was no longer a human being tolerated by wolves. She was pack. 2 weeks passed before Elena discovered why gaining the Alphas. Trust was only the beginning of her journey. The pack had led her deeper into the wilderness than any human had likely traveled in decades, through hidden valleys and along game trails that seemed to exist outside of time itself. Elena's scientific mind catalogued everything: the unique plant species, the pristine ecosystem, the signs of wildlife that should have been extinct in this region. The wolves had grown comfortable with her presence, allowing her to travel in the middle of their formation rather than trailing behind. The juvenile female, whom Elena had privately named Scout, had become particularly attached, often bringing Elena interesting stones or unusual flowers. The Alpha's mate, the blue-eyed female Elena called Luna, had begun including her in the pack's social grooming rituals, a sign of complete acceptance. But it was when they reached the sacred den that Elena understood the true magnitude of the trust she'd earned. Hidden in a box canyon, accessible only through a narrow passage between towering rock walls, the den was carved into the base of a massive granite cliff. Ancient petroglyphs covered the stone walls, images of wolves and humans hunting together, living in harmony. This wasn't just a wolf den. It was a place of spiritual significance that had been protected for generations. Luna led Elena to the entrance of the den, her body language conveying both excitement and solemnity. As they approached, Elena heard soft, whimpering sounds from within. Her heart nearly stopped when she realized what she was hearing. Puppies. Luna was allowing her, a human, to approach her newborn offspring. In the world of pack dynamics, this was the ultimate declaration of trust. Elena followed Luna into the cool darkness of the den, her eyes adjusting to reveal a sight that would be burned into her memory forever. 3 tiny puppies, no more than a few weeks old, lay nestled together in a hollow lined with soft moss and Luna's shed fur. Their eyes were still closed, their movements unsteady and adorable. Luna settled beside them, her massive head resting protectively near her babies, but her blue eyes remained fixed on Elena. The alpha appeared in the den entrance, watching carefully as Elena knelt several feet away from the puppies. This was a test unlike any she'd faced before. One wrong move, one gesture that could be interpreted as threatening, and the tentative trust she'd built would shatter instantly. Instead, Elena remained perfectly still, allowing Luna to make all the decisions. What happened next defied every piece of scientific literature Elena had ever read about wolf behavior. Luna gently picked up one of the puppies, a tiny grey male with distinctive white markings on his chest, and carried him to Elena. She placed the puppy directly in Elena's lap, then returned to her position beside the other 2, watching intently. Elena's hands trembled as she carefully cradled the tiny life in her palms. The puppy was impossibly soft, his little body warm and completely trusting. He nuzzled against her fingers, seeking warmth and comfort, with the absolute faith that only newborns possess. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as the magnitude of this moment hit her. Luna wasn't just showing her the puppies. She was asking Elena to help raise them. Over the following hours, Elena was gradually introduced to each puppy. The second was a female with Luna's striking black coat, bold and already showing signs of her mother's intelligence. The third was another male, smaller than his siblings, but with eyes that promised to be as amber and penetrating as his father's. Luna allowed Elena to help feed them, to keep them warm, to be present for every aspect of their early care. As night fell and the pack settled around the den, Elena realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in the modern world, the complete integration of a human being into a wolf family structure. She wasn't just accepted, she was needed. These magnificent creatures had chosen her to be part of their legacy, part of their future. The responsibility was overwhelming, but so was the honor. The harmony Elena had found with the pack was shattered when they encountered another group of wolves 3 weeks later. Elena had been helping Luna care for the rapidly growing puppies, who had opened their eyes and begun to explore the world with typical juvenile curiosity. The little grey male, whom Elena had named Storm for his adventurous spirit, had become particularly attached to her, often following her around the den area like a devoted shadow. The intruding pack appeared at dawn, 7 wolves led by a scarred alpha male whose presence immediately set Elena's pack on edge. These weren't the noble, intelligent creatures she'd come to know and respect. Their leader bore the marks of cruel fights, and his pack carried themselves with the swagger of wolves who took what they wanted through violence rather than earning it through strength and wisdom. Elena watched from the safety of the den entrance. As the 2 alphas faced each other in the clearing below, the confrontation was ritualistic but deadly serious. This was about territory, resources, and the right to exist in these mountains. Elena's alpha, whom she'd privately named Rex for, His regal bearing stood his ground with quiet dignity. But the scarred Alpha, who radiated malevolence, was clearly looking for any excuse to turn this territorial dispute into something bloodier. The tipping point came when Storm, despite Luna's warning growls, wandered too close to the confrontation. The scarred Alpha's eyes locked onto the puppy, and Elena saw predatory calculation in his gaze. In wolf-pack dynamics, killing the offspring of a rival alpha was a way to establish dominance and force submission. Storm was in mortal danger, and he didn't even know it. Without thinking, Elena acted on pure instinct. She vaulted down from the den entrance, landing between Storm and the hostile alpha. The scarred wolf was enormous, easily the largest predator Elena had ever faced, and his yellow eyes held no trace of the intelligence and nobility she'd found in Rex. This was a killer, pure and simple. "Stay back," Elena said firmly, though she knew the wolf couldn't understand her words. What mattered was her body language, her positioning, her willingness to face death to protect one of the pack's offspring. She scooped Storm into her arms, feeling his tiny heart beating rapidly against her chest. The puppy sensed the danger and pressed close to her, instinctively seeking protection. The scarred alpha snarled, his lips pulling back to reveal massive fangs stained with old blood. He began to circle Elena, looking for an opening to attack both her and the puppy. But before he could strike, Rex moved with lightning speed, placing himself alongside Elena. Luna appeared on her other side, her blue eyes blazing with protective fury. The entire pack formed a defensive formation around Elena and Storm, presenting a united front against the intruders. What followed was less a battle than a statement. Rex didn't just fight the scarred alpha, he dominated him, using not just physical strength but tactical intelligence that spoke to years of successful leadership. The hostile pack, seeing their leader outmatched, began to withdraw, but the scarred alpha, humiliated and enraged, made one final desperate lunge, not at Rex, but at Elena and the puppy she protected. Elena threw herself sideways, shielding. Storm, with her body as massive jaws, snapped inches from her face. She felt claws rake across her shoulder, drawing blood, but her only concern was keeping the puppy safe. Then Rex was there, his powerful jaws clamping down on the hostile alpha's throat. The fight ended quickly after that, with the scarred wolf retreating in defeat, his pack following him into the distant forest. As Elena sat in the clearing, bleeding but alive, with Storm still clutched protectively in her arms, she realized something profound had changed. Rex approached her slowly, his amber eyes holding something new, not just acceptance or even respect, but genuine pride. She had proven herself worthy not just of pack membership, but of defending their young. Luna gently licked Elena's wounds, a grooming behavior reserved for family members, while the other puppies tumbled out of the den to investigate the commotion. 6 months had passed since Elena first encountered the pack, and the mountain wilderness had become more home to her than any place she'd ever lived. The puppies had grown into strong, intelligent juveniles, each developing their own distinct personality. Storm had indeed become Elena's shadow, following her everywhere and learning from her as much as from his wolf parents. The female, whom Elena called Sage for her thoughtful nature, showed remarkable problem-solving abilities, while the smallest male, Echo, possessed an uncanny ability to mimic sounds and had even learned to respond to some of Elena's spoken commands. Elena had established a unique role within the pack structure, not quite alpha, but certainly more than subordinate. She was the bridge between two worlds, the keeper of knowledge that benefited the entire family. Her scientific background helped her identify the best seasonal feeding grounds, predict weather patterns, and even treat minor injuries with natural remedies she'd learned to prepare from local plants. The test of their eternal bond came when Elena fell seriously ill. An infected wound from a fall while tracking prey had developed into a dangerous fever, leaving her delirious and barely conscious. In the den, for 3 days, she drifted in and out of awareness, her body fighting an infection that threatened to claim her life. During her illness, Elena experienced something extraordinary. The entire pack took turns caring for her. Rex brought her fresh water in his mouth. Luna shared her body heat during the cold nights, and the juveniles brought her small offerings of food and stayed close to provide comfort. But it was the adult pack's decision that truly demonstrated the depth of their bond with her. When Elena was at her weakest, barely able to lift her head, Rex made a choice that defied every natural instinct. He left the territory. Something alphas never did during denning season, and traveled to the edge of human civilization. There, he did something unprecedented. He approached a rural veterinary clinic and refused to leave until the veterinarian followed him back into the wilderness. Dr. Sarah Chen, the vet who answered Rex's summons, later described the experience as the most extraordinary of her career. "I've never seen anything like it," she told Elena during her recovery. "This massive wolf appeared at my clinic, completely calm, but clearly agitated about something. When I tried to shoo him away, he grabbed my medical bag in his jaws and started pulling me toward the forest. Something in his eyes told me this wasn't a normal animal encounter." Rex led Dr. Chen through miles of rough terrain directly to the den, where Elena lay unconscious and burning with fever. The veterinarian, initially terrified to find herself surrounded by an entire wolf pack, quickly realized they had brought her there to save their human pack member. With antibiotic injections and proper medical care, Elena's recovery began immediately. The most remarkable part came when Dr. Chen prepared to leave. Rex approached her with something in his mouth, a piece of carved antler bearing ancient symbols that matched the petroglyphs on the den walls. It was a gift, a token of gratitude from one healer to another. Dr. Chen accepted it with the same reverence with which it was offered, understanding that she had witnessed something that challenged everything science thought it knew about wolf intelligence and emotional capacity. As Elena recovered her strength over the following weeks, she made a decision that would define the rest of her life. The corporate interests that had tried to eliminate her hadn't given up. They were simply waiting for another opportunity. But Elena now had something they could never anticipate or understand. A family that would defend her as fiercely as she would defend them. Working with Dr. Chen and other wildlife advocates, Elena began documenting her extraordinary relationship with the pack. Her scientific credentials, combined with photographic and video evidence of human-wolf cooperation, sparked a global conservation movement. The ancient denning grounds were designated as a protected sanctuary, ensuring that Rex's lineage would continue for generations to come. On quiet evenings, as Elena sat with Storm's head resting in her lap, while Rex and Luna watched over their domain, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had lost her old life, but gained something infinitely more precious, a bond that transcended species, built on mutual respect, shared sacrifice, and unconditional love. The young wolves would grow up knowing that humans could be trusted, allies rather than threats, carrying that knowledge forward to future generations. In earning the respect of predators and being entrusted with their offspring, Elena had discovered a profound truth. Family isn't defined by biology or species, but by the willingness to protect, nurture, and sacrifice for one another. As she watched Storm playfully wrestle with his siblings under the watchful eyes of their parents, Elena knew she was witnessing the future. A world where understanding could bridge any divide, where trust could overcome any fear, and where love could create bonds stronger than any natural law.